Bear cub was caged underwater in aquarium. What this baby did was shocking. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help us to remain in touch with amazing people like you. The morning sun had barely touched the polished glass of Ocean View Aquarium when Olivia Chen arrived for her shift. Rain drummed against the roof, creating a soothing backdrop that contrasted sharply with the tension inside. Clutching her coffee cup tightly, she navigated through the employee entrance, her mind still processing the rumors that had been circulating among the staff. Something wasn't right in the newly opened North Wing. Olivia wasn't supposed to be there today. A last-minute call from her manager had pulled her from a rare day off, citing an emergency staff shortage. As she swiped her badge and pushed through the heavy door, the familiar scent of salt water and cleaning chemicals filled her nostrils. But there was something else, an undercurrent of secrecy that seemed to cling to the walls. "Thank goodness you're here," whispered Dominic, a maintenance worker who had been with the aquarium for over 20 years. His eyes darted nervously toward the corridor leading to the restricted area. They brought it in last night, after hours. "Brought what in?" Olivia asked, shrugging off her rain-soaked jacket. Dominic leaned closer, his voice barely audible over the hum of the massive filtration systems. "A bear cub, but that's not the worst part. They've put it in Tank 17. Olivia's coffee cup slipped from her fingers, splashing hot liquid across the tiled floor. Tank 17 was part of the underwater viewing tunnel, a section designed for marine life that needed to be fully submerged. Her mind struggled to make sense of Dominic's words. "That's impossible," she stammered. "Who would authorize something like that? It's not just cruel, it's what the new management calls innovative exhibition." Dominic cut in, his weathered face creased with concern. "Some rich investor's idea, they're calling it adaptations, supposedly showing how different species adapt to new environments." He spat the words out like they were poison. Before Olivia could respond, the aquarium's loudspeakers crackled to life, announcing the arrival of the first school group of the day. 30 kindergartners would be touring the facility within the hour, including the newly opened North Wing. "I have to see it," Olivia decided, abandoning her spilled coffee. "Which section exactly?" "Deep-sea corridor at the very end, but Olivia—" Dominic grabbed her arm, his grip surprisingly strong. "Be careful. Director Phillips has security monitoring that area. They're calling it a sensitive exhibit with controlled viewing." As Olivia hurried through the winding back passages of the aquarium, her mind raced. She had dedicated her career to marine life conservation and education. The thought of a terrestrial animal, a bear cub no less, being subjected to submersion for entertainment was beyond comprehension. The deep-sea corridor was intentionally designed with low lighting to showcase bioluminescent creatures. Today, it seemed even darker, with several display lights mysteriously malfunctioning. As she approached Tank 17, positioned in an alcove somewhat separated from the main path, Olivia's heart pounded against her ribs. A single security guard stood nearby, his attention momentarily diverted by his radio. When she finally glimpsed inside the tank, the sight knocked the breath from her lungs. Through the murky water, she could make out a small, brown form huddled in the corner of a glass enclosure. The bear cub, no more than a few months old, had its tiny paws pressed against a small air pocket at the top of the tank. Its eyes were wide with terror, its movements increasingly sluggish as it struggled to keep its nose above the rising water level. Olivia's hands flew to her mouth, stifling a cry of outrage. Above the tank, a clinical sign read, "Temporary Exhibit, Ursine Aquatic Adaptation Study. Do not disturb." Just then, The patter of small feet echoed down the corridor. The kindergarten group was approaching, led by a young teacher who was pointing out various fish in the surrounding tanks. At the back of the group, separated slightly from the others, a small girl with dark curly hair clutched a worn stuffed bear to her chest. Her large brown eyes scanned the dimly lit space with wonder until they landed on Tank 17. The child stopped abruptly, falling behind her classmates. Olivia watched as the girl's expression transformed from curiosity to confusion, and then to something deeper. A recognition of wrongness that transcended her young age. The little girl took a step closer to the tank, then another, drawn by some invisible thread of empathy that adults too often lose. And in that moment, as their paths converged before the underwater cage, Olivia realized that saving the cub might require an ally, even one who was barely tall enough to see into the tank without standing on tiptoes. What happened next would change both their lives forever, though neither could possibly imagine how. The little girl stood frozen, her stuffed bear dangling loosely from her fingers as she stared at the real cub trapped behind the glass. She turned to Olivia, her voice small but clear in the hushed corridor. "The baby bear is drowning," she said, not as a question but as a simple, devastating truth that the adults around her had somehow failed to acknowledge. Olivia knelt beside her, acutely aware of the security guard glancing in their direction. "What's your name?" she whispered. "Lily," the child replied, never taking her eyes off the struggling cub. "He's scared." Before Olivia could respond, the cub's movements became more frantic. The water level had risen another inch, leaving barely enough space for its muzzle. Its tiny lungs heaved visibly through its soaked fur as it fought for each breath. Somewhere in the distance, a deep, mournful sound echoed through the aquarium's ventilation system, a sound no marine creature could make. "Did you hear that?" Lily asked, her eyes widening. Olivia had. It was a sound she'd heard only on nature documentaries, the distressed call of an adult bear searching for its cub. The realization hit her like a physical blow. They hadn't just captured a cub for this twisted exhibit. They had the mother, too, somewhere else in the facility. "Lily, where's your teacher?" Olivia asked urgently, scanning the corridor for the kindergarten group that had continued moving through the exhibits. "Miss Harper is showing everyone the jellyfish," Lily said, pointing vaguely toward the next hall. "I told her I needed to tie my shoe." She looked down at her Velcro sneakers, then back at Olivia with solemn eyes that held no apology for the small deception. The security guard's radio crackled again, and he stepped further away, engaged in what seemed to be an intense conversation. Olivia seized the moment, quickly examining the tank's control panel partially hidden behind a decorative coral formation. Her years working at the aquarium hadn't prepared her for this specific system, but she recognized the basic components: water intake valves, temperature controls, and most importantly, emergency drainage protocols. "Lily, I need you to do something very brave," Olivia whispered, making a split-second decision that could cost her job, or worse. "When I count to 3, I want you to go over to your class and tell Miss Harper that you saw a leak in one of the tanks back here. Can you do that?" Lily nodded solemnly, clutching her stuffed bear tighter. 1, 2. But before Olivia could reach 3, the unexpected happened. The cub, in a desperate attempt to find air, slammed against the glass with surprising force. The impact created a hairline crack in the tank, almost imperceptible but present. Water began to seep through, a thin trickle forming a small puddle on the floor. Simultaneously, the mournful bellowing grew louder. The mother bear wasn't just calling out, she was getting closer. "Change of plan," Olivia said quickly, heart racing. Lily, go find your teacher now and tell her everyone needs to leave this area immediately. Tell her there's water on the floor. It's dangerous. Can you do that?" Lily nodded again, her little face set with determination beyond her years. She turned to go, but paused for a moment to place her stuffed bear at the base of the tank. A small gesture of solidarity that brought tears to Olivia's eyes. As Lily disappeared around the corner, Olivia faced a critical decision. The security guard was still distracted, but wouldn't be for long. The crack was spreading, water now streaming onto the floor in a steady flow. The cub's eyes were growing dull with exhaustion, its movements slowing dangerously. And somewhere in the aquarium, an enraged mother bear was fighting to reach her baby. Olivia reached for her employee badge, which doubled as a master key for maintenance emergencies. One swipe, and she could activate the emergency drainage, but it would trigger alarms throughout the building. Her mind raced through the consequences: evacuation protocols, possible flooding, disciplinary action, maybe even criminal charges for endangering visitors. Then her eyes met those of the drowning cub, and all hesitation vanished. She swiped her card through the reader. Nothing happened. She tried again, heart pounding in her ears. Still nothing. They must have changed the security protocols for this exhibit without updating the staff. The digital display flashed, "Access denied," in bold red letters. The security guard turned, noticing the growing puddle at Olivia's feet. "Hey, what are you doing over there?" he called, starting to walk toward her. In that critical moment, the aquarium's light suddenly flickered and went out, plunging the corridor into darkness save for the emergency floor lighting and the eerie blue glow from the surrounding tanks. The security systems reset with an audible click. A voice crackled over the guard's radio. "Code yellow in sectors 3 and 4. Power failure. All security personnel report to emergency stations." The guard hesitated, looking from Olivia to his radio and back again. "Stay right there," he ordered before jogging toward the main hall, duty to the wider facility overriding his surveillance of a single exhibit. In the semi-darkness, Olivia heard a familiar voice behind her. "The backup generator will kick in within 3 minutes, Dominic said, appearing beside her with a ring of maintenance keys. "That should give us enough time." Olivia stared at him, understanding dawning. "You cut the power?" "Not exactly," Dominic replied with a grim smile, selecting a key from his ring. "Let's just say I expedited a scheduled electrical inspection. Now, let's get this poor creature out before my former colleagues at security figure out what's happening." As he spoke, he inserted a physical key into a manual override panel that Olivia hadn't even noticed, concealed behind a hinged section of the decorative frame. The tank's drainage system hummed to life, and water began to recede. But they weren't working fast enough. The crack in the glass was spreading rapidly, and the water pressure was building behind it. The cub, sensing the change, tried to swim toward the surface where the water level was dropping, but its strength was fading. Its movements were uncoordinated, its small body starting to succumb to exhaustion and oxygen deprivation. "We need to break the access panel on top," Olivia said urgently, looking around for something heavy. "If we do that, the whole tank could shatter," Dominic warned. These weren't designed for rapid decompression. He worked feverishly at the control panel, trying to increase the drainage rate. The bellowing sound grew louder, followed by a crash from somewhere nearby. The mother bear was getting closer, and she sounded furious. Then, over the aquarium's emergency announcement system, a calm voice declared, "Attention, all visitors and staff. Due to a technical malfunction, the Ocean View Aquarium will be closing immediately. Please proceed calmly to the nearest exit following the illuminated floor pathways. Staff members will assist in your evacuation." But the evacuation announcement was immediately followed by another sound, the high-pitched wail of a security alarm from the direction of the North Wing's restricted area. The mother bear had broken free. Elsewhere in the aquarium, panic erupted. Distant shouting echoed through the corridors, accompanied by the sound of running feet and the continued automated evacuation instructions. "This is about to get a lot more complicated," Dominic muttered, still working at the drainage controls. The water level in the tank had dropped to half, but the cub was now floating limply, its small head barely above the surface. Olivia made a split-second decision. She grabbed a fire extinguisher from a nearby emergency station and, before Dominic could stop her, slammed it against the access hatch at the top of the tank. The reinforced glass cracked but didn't break. "Olivia, wait!" Dominic shouted, but she was beyond caution now. She struck again, and this time the hatch shattered. Water surged upward through the opening, splashing her face and shirt. Without hesitation, she plunged her arms into the cold water, reaching for the cub. Her fingers brushed against wet fur, once, twice, before she managed to get a secure grip. With Dominic helping to brace her, she lifted the limp, soaking form from the water. The cub was unnaturally still, its eyes closed, its small body completely motionless in her arms. "No, no, no," Olivia whispered, laying it gently on the floor. "Come on, little one." She began pressing carefully on its chest, trying to remember the wildlife rescue training she'd received years ago. Was it the same for bears as for dogs? She had no idea, but she had to try something. After what seemed like an eternity, the cub sputtered, water dribbling from its mouth and nose. It took a shuddering breath, then another, each one stronger than the last. Olivia nearly collapsed with relief, tears streaming down her face. "We need to get it warm," Dominic said, already shrugging off his uniform jacket to wrap around the trembling cub. "And we need to find somewhere safe," Olivia added, acutely aware of the chaos unfolding around them. The sound of the mother bear's roars was now interspersed with human screams, and what might have been tranquilizer darts being fired. Just then, small footsteps pattered down the corridor, and Lily reappeared, her eyes wide with excitement rather than fear. "Did you save the baby bear?" she asked, seemingly oblivious to the evacuation order and the commotion elsewhere in the building. "Lily, what are you doing here? Where's your class?" Olivia asked, instinctively shielding the recovering cub from view. "They all went outside," Lily said matter-of-factly, "but I came back to get my bear." She pointed to the stuffed toy still sitting at the base of the now cracked tank. "And to help the real bear." Her voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. "I know where his mommy is." Olivia and Dominic exchanged startled looks. "How do you know that, sweetheart?" Olivia asked carefully, wondering if the child was simply making things up. "I saw her when we first got here. She's in the big room where they keep the machines. There's a cage with trees inside." Lily's description, though simple, was detailed enough to be convincing. The machine room had to be near the aquarium's primary life support systems, an area usually off-limits to visitors, but where the kindergarten group might have been given a special educational tour. If Lily was right, the mother bear wasn't rampaging through the public areas of the aquarium as they'd feared. She was still contained, though clearly distressed enough that her sounds were carrying through the ventilation system. Before they could decide what to do with this information, the emergency lights flickered and the main power hummed back to life. The backup generators had engaged. With power restored, the security systems would reset, including the cameras in their immediate vicinity. "We're out of time," Dominic said urgently. "Security will be checking the camera feeds any second." Olivia made a decision. Cradling the cub close to her chest, she looked at Lily and Dominic. "We need to reunite them and get them out of here, both of them." "Are you out of your mind?" Dominic hissed, though his hands were gentle as he adjusted his jacket around the shivering cub. "That's a full-grown wild bear we're talking about, not to mention the legal implications of what we're already doing." "And what do you suggest?" Olivia countered, her voice low but intense. "That we hand this cub over to the same people who put it in an underwater tank? The people who separated it from its mother and were willing to let it drown for entertainment." The cub stirred in her arms, making a soft whimpering sound that tore at her heart. Dominic's weathered face softened. After 20 years at the aquarium, he'd seen management come and go, policies change, sometimes for better, sometimes for worse, but nothing like this. "This new director has gone too far," he admitted, "but we need a plan, not just good intentions." "I can show you the way," Lily insisted, retrieving her stuffed bear from the floor. She hugged it to her chest, then held it out toward the real cub with solemn ceremony. "Bear wants to help, too." Despite the gravity of the situation, Olivia felt a smile tug at her lips. The little girl's courage was extraordinary. "Lily, sweetheart, you've been amazing, but we need to get you back to your class. Your teacher must be worried sick." Lily's face fell, but before she could protest, the overhead speakers crackled again, and Director Phillips's voice echoed through the halls, smooth and controlled, betraying none of the chaos unfolding in his facility. "Attention all security personnel. We have an internal situation involving exhibit assets in the North Wing. All available teams proceed to Sector 7 immediately. Containment Protocol Delta is now in effect." Dominic's face paled. "Sector 7 is the life support area, where Lily says the mother bear is being kept. They're going to tranquilize her, or worse." "What's tranquilize?" Lily asked, struggling with the word. "It means make her sleep," Olivia explained gently, making a split-second decision. "Lily, we're going to get you back to your teacher, but first, can you show us exactly where you saw the mother bear?" The little girl nodded eagerly, clutching her stuffed toy. "This way. I remember because it was by the room with the giant fan." "The main ventilation hub," Dominic translated. "She's right. It's adjacent to the life support systems. But getting there won't be easy. The corridors will be crawling with security." "Then we don't use the corridors," Olivia said, glancing upward. "We use the maintenance tunnels." Dominic followed her gaze to a service hatch in the ceiling, barely visible among the decorative elements designed to create the illusion of an underwater cave. "Those haven't been used in years," he warned, "and they're not designed for someone carrying a bear cub." "Do we have another option?" Olivia asked, already looking around for something to stand on. Before Dominic could answer, the sound of footsteps echoed from the corridor behind them, multiple sets, moving quickly. Security was returning. "Fine," Dominic conceded, quickly pushing a nearby bench beneath the hatch. "But if we're doing this, we're doing it right." He reached into his pocket and produced a small radio. "Maintenance channel. Security doesn't monitor it." With surprising agility for his age, Dominic climbed onto the bench and pushed open the ceiling hatch, revealing a narrow crawl space above. "Ladies first," he said, reaching down to help Lily up. "I'm scared of the dark," Lily admitted in a small voice, looking up at the dim passage. "That's okay," Olivia assured her, shifting the cub to one arm so she could reach into her pocket. She pulled out her phone and activated the flashlight. "Here's some light and you'll have your bear. Plus, we'll be right behind you." With careful maneuvering, they managed to get Lily into the maintenance tunnel, followed by Olivia with the cub, and finally Dominic, who pulled the hatch closed behind them just as voices entered the exhibit area below. "What happened here?" they heard a stern voice demand. "Where's the specimen?" "The tunnel's low, so we'll have to crawl," Dominic whispered, taking the lead with Lily close behind him. "Stay on the metal track. The panels between might not support our weight." The passage was cramped and dusty, with cobwebs clinging to the corners and the occasional scurrying sound suggesting they weren't the only creatures using these forgotten pathways. The cub, still weak but increasingly alert, squirmed uncomfortably in Olivia's arms as she awkwardly crawled forward, trying to keep its weight balanced. "It's not much further," Lily whispered, seemingly untroubled by the confined space now that she had a mission. "Just past the big pipes." They crawled in tense silence, the sounds of the aquarium muffled above and below them. The continued evacuation announcements, the distant shouts of security personnel, and underneath it all, the deep, rumbling calls of the mother bear, growing louder as they approached. After what seemed like an eternity of inching forward on hands and knees, Dominic held up a hand for them to stop. Below them, through the slats of another service hatch, they could see into a vast room filled with machinery, pumps, filters, and the massive ventilation system that circulated air throughout the aquarium. And there, in a hastily constructed enclosure of reinforced glass and steel, paced the mother bear. She was magnificent and terrifying, her dark fur sleek, her muscles rippling with power as she moved restlessly from one side of her prison to the other. Every few moments she would rear up on her hind legs, sniffing the air, then let out another mournful call that seemed to shake the very walls. "She knows her cub is close," Olivia whispered, feeling the small creature in her arms respond to its mother's calls with a weak whimper of its own. Around the enclosure, a team of men and women in the aquarium's security uniform were gathering, led by a tall, thin man in an expensive suit. Director Phillips himself, Olivia realized with a surge of anger. In his hand was what appeared to be a tranquilizer gun. "Preparations for transport need to be accelerated," Phillips was saying, his voice cold and clinical. "The unexpected breach in Tank 17 has compromised the entire exhibition timeline. We'll need to move both specimens tonight." "Sir, with all due respect," one of the security team interjected, "that bear is already agitated. Moving her now, especially without her cub, could be dangerous for the handling team." Phillips dismissed the concern with a wave of his hand. "That's why we have tranquilizers, Edwards. I want her sedated and ready for transport within the hour. As for the cub—" He paused, consulting his tablet. "Security is conducting a sweep now. Once recovered, it will be assessed for viability. If it's compromised by its time in the water, we'll need to source a replacement." Olivia felt sick. Assessed for viability. Source a replacement. They were talking about living creatures as if they were defective products. "We have to do something," she whispered to Dominic. "They're going to separate them permanently." The cub shifted in her arms, gaining strength by the minute but still far too weak to survive without proper care. Its dark eyes were fixed on the scene below, tiny nostrils flaring as it caught its mother's scent. "I have an idea," Dominic said finally, his voice so low they could barely hear him. "But it's risky, and you're not going to like it." "At this point, I'm open to anything," Olivia replied. Dominic pointed to the massive ventilation fan at the far end of the room, currently motionless as the system operated on emergency power. The primary ventilation system connects to an exterior air intake on the north side of the building. When the full power comes back online, those fans will restart automatically. "And?" Olivia prompted, not seeing the plan. "And if the fans were to malfunction, say by something jamming the main rotor, The emergency protocols would trigger. Dominic's eyes gleamed with the cunning of someone who knew the building's systems intimately. First, an alarm. Then, automatic shutdown of all connected systems to prevent fire hazards. And finally, emergency venting of the affected. Emergency venting? Olivia repeated. The exterior panels open automatically to prevent dangerous gas buildup. They open outward to a service area that leads directly to the delivery access road. Dominic glanced meaningfully at the bare enclosure. Those panels are large enough for a bear to pass through. Olivia stared at him. You want to cause a system failure to create an escape route? That's your plan? Dominic shrugged. I told you that you wouldn't like it. But what about the tranquilizers? Olivia nodded toward Director Phillips, who was now instructing the security team on dart placement. Even if we could somehow get the mother bear to the exit, they'll have sedated her before we can implement any of this. That's where I come in, said a new voice, so unexpected that all three of them jumped. From a connecting maintenance tunnel, a figure emerged. A woman in her early 30s with a Wildlife Conservation Service uniform partially concealed under an aquarium maintenance jacket. Her dark hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail, and her expression was one of controlled fury. Maya? Dominic gasped. What are you doing here? Following a tip, the woman, Maya, replied, her eyes fixed on the bear cub in Olivia's arms. Anonymous call to the WCS hotline about illegal wildlife trafficking at Ocean View. I've been undercover for 2 days, but couldn't locate the bears. Her gaze shifted to Lily. Looks like you had better luck. Lily beamed with pride, hugging her stuffed bear tighter. So, you're with Wildlife Services? Olivia asked, relief washing over her. You can help us save them? Maya's expression darkened. Not officially. I'm here alone because my supervisor didn't think there was enough evidence to warrant a formal investigation. Ocean View has powerful friends in the department. She nodded toward the scene below. But what I've seen is enough to shut this place down for good, if we can document it and get these bears to safety. And if we get caught? Dominic asked. Then we're all facing criminal charges for interfering with aquarium property, Maya said bluntly, but I'm willing to take that risk. She looked pointedly at the cub, then at Lily. Though I think we need to get the little girl out of here first. Lily's face crumpled. But I want to help the bears. You already have, Olivia assured her. You've been the bravest person here. But your teacher and your friends need to know you're safe. Maya reached into her pocket and pulled out what looked like a security access card. I've been assigned to the maintenance team as part of my cover. I can take her through the staff exit near the east wing. It's being used for the evacuation. No one will question another staff member helping a lost child. Olivia hesitated, reluctant to let Lily go with a stranger, but Dominic nodded in confirmation. Maya's one of the good ones. She used to work here before she joined Wildlife Services. She'll make sure Lily gets back to her group safely. After a moment's thought, Olivia nodded. Okay, but be careful. And Lily, she reached out to gently touch the little girl's cheek. Thank you. Without you, we might never have found the cub in time. Lily smiled, then solemnly held out her stuffed bear. Bear wants to stay with the baby, to keep him brave until he finds his mommy. Tears pricked at Olivia's eyes as she accepted the well-loved toy. That's very generous. I promise we'll take good care of him. As Maya led Lily back through the tunnel toward safety, Dominic turned to Olivia with renewed determination. Now, about that ventilation system. But before they could discuss the plan further, a commotion erupted below. The mother bear had caught the scent of her cub and was becoming increasingly agitated, throwing herself against the glass walls of her enclosure with such force that they visibly shuddered with each impact. "Sedate her now," Director Phillips ordered, raising his tranquilizer gun. "Wait." A security team member held up a hand. "Look at the stress readings. Her heart rate's through the roof. If we tranquilize her in this state, we could lose her." Phillips hesitated, clearly weighing the risk to his investment against the danger of an increasingly frenzied bear. In Olivia's arms, the cub responded to its mother's distress with renewed energy, squirming and making small, pitiful sounds that carried through the open space below. Suddenly, the mother bear froze. Her massive head tilted upward, nostrils flaring as she caught the scent coming from the maintenance tunnel. With a roar that seemed to shake the entire building, she reared up on her hind legs, her full height now reaching nearly 7 feet as she pawed at the air in the direction of her cub. "What's she responding to?" Phillips demanded, looking around wildly. But Olivia didn't hear his answer. The cub had begun to struggle in earnest now, its strength returning in response to its mother's calls. It squirmed out of her grasp before she could tighten her hold, tumbling onto the metal grate of the maintenance tunnel with a small thud. For a heart-stopping moment, the cub tottered on the edge of the grate, disoriented and weak. Then, before either Olivia or Dominic could react, its weight caused the section of grating to give way, sending the small creature plummeting toward the room below. "No!" Olivia cried, lunging forward helplessly. Time seemed to slow as the cub fell, its small form twisting in the air. But instead of hitting the concrete floor as Olivia feared, it landed on something else. The broad back of a security team member who had been standing directly below, knocking the man forward onto his knees. For a split second, everyone in the room froze in shock. The cub, dazed but unharmed, rolled off the man's back and onto the floor, blinking in confusion at the suddenly bright lights and strange surroundings. Then several things happened at once. The mother bear let out a roar of such primal fury that several security team members instinctively backed away from her enclosure. Director Phillips raised his tranquilizer gun, taking aim not at the mother, but at the vulnerable cub, and Olivia, acting purely on instinct, pushed herself through the damaged grating and dropped to the floor below, landing in a crouch beside the stunned cub. "Don't move!" Phillips shouted, swinging his weapon toward her. "Security, detain this woman immediately!" But no one moved. All eyes were fixed on the mother bear, who was now hurling her full weight against the glass wall of her enclosure, over and over, with a single-minded determination that was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. With each impact, the specially reinforced glass shuddered, and tiny fractures began to spread like spiderwebs from the corners. "It's not going to hold," one of the security team warned, backing toward the exit. "Sir, we need to evacuate now." Phillips remained frozen, his tranquilizer gun still aimed at Olivia and the cub, his face contorted with rage and disbelief as his carefully constructed exhibition literally began to fall apart before his eyes. Olivia scooped up the cub and held it protectively against her chest, her eyes never leaving the director's face. "Lower your weapon," she said, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. "This has gone far enough." From above, Dominic called down, "Olivia, catch." He tossed Lily's stuffed bear through the opening in the grate. It landed at Olivia's feet, a small, soft presence amid the chaos. The stuffed toy caught Phillips's attention, momentarily distracting him from Olivia and the cub. "What is the meaning of—" His words were cut short by the sound of shattering glass as the mother bear's relentless assault finally breached her prison. With a triumphant roar, she burst through the weakened section, sending shards of safety glass cascading across the floor. The security team scattered, fleeing toward the exits as the massive creature shook herself free of the remaining glass fragments, her dark eyes scanning the room until they locked onto Olivia and the cub in her arms. For one terrifying, breathless moment, Olivia stood perfectly still as the mother bear lowered her head, nostrils flaring as she processed the scents before her cub, and the human holding it. "Don't run," Dominic called from above, his voice tight with tension. "Just stay very still." Olivia couldn't have moved if she tried. Her legs seemed rooted to the spot as the enormous predator took one careful step forward, then another, her massive paws making surprisingly little sound on the concrete floor. At the edge of her vision, Olivia could see Phillips backing slowly toward the exit, his tranquilizer gun now aimed at the mother bear's broad back. "No," Olivia whispered more to herself than to him. "Don't." Whether Phillips heard her or simply lost his nerve, he hesitated, then turned and fled, following his security team through the door and sealing it behind them with the emergency lockdown protocol. Now it was just Olivia, the cub, and its mother in the cavernous machine room, with Dominic watching helplessly from above. The mother bear approached slowly, each deliberate step bringing her closer to her cub, and to Olivia, whose heart pounded so loudly she was certain the bear could hear it. When the mother was just a few feet away, she stopped, rising slightly on her hind legs to better examine the human holding her baby. Her hot breath washed over Olivia's face, carrying the wild scent of forests and freedom now tainted by captivity. "Easy," Olivia whispered both to the bear and to herself. With exquisite care, she knelt down and gently placed the cub on the floor, making sure Lily's stuffed bear was beside it. Her trembling hands retreated slowly as she sank back onto her heels, eyes lowered submissively. The cub, still weak but galvanized by its mother's presence, took a wobbly step forward, then another, letting out a small whimper. The mother bear immediately dropped to all fours, her massive head lowering to nuzzle her baby. She sniffed thoroughly, checking for injuries, her movements both gentle and precise. Olivia remained motionless, hardly daring to breathe as the mother bear inspected her cub. The powerful creature could end her life with a single swipe of those enormous paws. Yet despite her fear, Olivia found herself moved to tears by the tender reunion unfolding before her. Whatever else these bears were, wild, dangerous, unpredictable, they were also a family, with bonds as deep and true as any human connection. The cub pressed against its mother, seeking comfort and security after its ordeal. It nuzzled against her fur, making small, insistent noises. The mother responded by carefully licking her baby, cleaning away the aquarium water that still clung to its fur. Then something unexpected happened. The cub tottered over to where Lily's stuffed bear lay on the concrete floor. It sniffed the toy curiously, then picked it up in its mouth and carried it back to its mother, dropping it at her massive paws like an offering. The mother bear inspected the strange object, nudging it cautiously with her snout. After apparently deciding it posed no threat, she returned her attention to her cub, gently grooming its damp fur. "I think we're being dismissed," Dominic called softly from above. But before Olivia could even consider how to retreat, the sound of metal striking metal echoed through the room as the emergency exit door began to shake. Someone was trying to override the lockdown. "They're coming back," Olivia hissed, looking frantically around the room. The mother bear also tensed, her head swinging toward the noise, a low growl building in her throat. Dominic's voice came urgent from above. "The ventilation plan. We need to do it now. There's a control panel on the east wall, the one with the red warning sign." Olivia spotted it immediately. A metal box labeled Environmental Systems Override. But to reach it, she would need to move past the bears, putting herself between them and the door that was now beginning to screech open as someone forced it with a hydraulic tool. The mother bear's growl deepened, her attention divided between protecting her cub from the new threat and watching the human still crouched on the floor nearby. Heart racing, Olivia slowly rose to her feet. "I want to help you," she said softly, knowing the bear couldn't understand her words, but hoping her tone might somehow convey her intent. "But you need to let me reach that panel." As if in response, the mother bear nudged her cub behind her massive form, her eyes never leaving Olivia's face. The message was clear: protect my baby or face my wrath. With the door creaking open another inch, Olivia made her decision. Moving with deliberate slowness, she began to edge around the perimeter of the room toward the control panel, giving the bears as wide a berth as possible. The mother bear watched intently but did not advance, seemingly understanding that Olivia was not moving toward her cub. When Olivia finally reached the control panel, the door had opened wide enough for a hand to reach through, fumbling for the interior release. "Activate Emergency Protocol Sierra 7, Dominic called down. The red button, then the numeric keypad, 4192. Olivia's fingers flew over the panel, pressing the sequence as directed. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Warning lights flashed throughout the facility, and a computerized voice announced over the loudspeakers. "Warning, environmental system failure detected. Emergency venting protocol initiated. All personnel evacuate affected areas immediately." A mechanical grinding sound filled the air as massive panels in the far wall began to slide open, revealing the gray light of the rainy day outside. The scent of fresh air and freedom flooded the room, cutting through the sterile, processed atmosphere of the aquarium. The mother bear's reaction was immediate. Her head swung toward the opening, nostrils flaring as she caught the scent of the outside world. With a soft grunt to her cub, she began to move toward the newly created exit, her powerful muscles rippling beneath her dark fur. The cub followed shakily, Lily's stuffed bear still clutched in its mouth like a precious treasure. They had nearly reached the opening when the door finally burst open, and Director Phillips rushed in, flanked by 2 security guards. All 3 held tranquilizer guns, raised and ready. "Stop right there!" Phillips shouted, his face contorted with rage. "Those animals are aquarium property. Security, take aim!" The mother bear whirled to face the new threat, positioning herself between the danger and her cub, her lips pulled back in a snarl, exposing teeth designed to tear through flesh and bone. "Don't!" Olivia cried, desperately throwing herself between the bears and the guns. "They're wild animals, not property. You can't keep them here. Get out of the way, Chen," Phillips ordered, his knuckles white around his weapon. "Or I'll have you arrested for theft and destruction of aquarium assets. Your career will be over." "I don't care," Olivia replied, surprised to find she genuinely meant it. "Some things matter more than a job." Phillips's face hardened, and he raised his gun higher. "Last warning, move or—" He never finished the sentence. From somewhere in the room, a high-pitched whistle sounded, followed by a small cylindrical object that arced through the air and landed at the feet of Phillips and his security team. Before anyone could react, it burst open, releasing a cloud of dense smoke that quickly engulfed them. Coughing and cursing filled the air as the 3 men stumbled blindly in the rapidly spreading haze. Olivia felt a hand grasp her arm and turned to find Maya beside her, a smoke canister launcher in her other hand. "Wildlife Service standard issue," she explained with a grim smile, "for creating a diversion during dangerous animal rescues." She looked past Olivia to where the mother bear stood hesitating at the threshold of freedom, her cub beside her. They need to go now while there's confusion. "But what about us?" Olivia asked, acutely aware of Phillips's threats. "He'll press charges." Maya's smile widened. "Let him try." She held up her phone, which had been recording the entire confrontation. Wildlife trafficking is a federal offense with a minimum 5-year sentence. I think Director Phillips has bigger problems than a few broken tanks and some damaged equipment. A shout from within the smoke indicated that Phillips and his team were regrouping. Maya pulled Olivia toward a different exit, a maintenance door on the opposite side of the room from where the bears stood poised to escape. "Come on," she urged. "Let them go. They know what to do." With one last look at the bears, Olivia allowed herself to be led away. The mother bear met her gaze for a brief moment, and Olivia could have sworn there was recognition in those deep, wild eyes. Not friendship exactly, but a primal understanding between two mothers protecting what mattered most. Then the bear turned, nudging her cub forward, and together they lumbered through the opening into the rain-washed world beyond. The last thing Olivia saw was the small stuffed bear still clutched in the cub's mouth as they disappeared into the mist. The aftermath unfolded more quickly than anyone could have anticipated. Maya's video, combined with testimony from Dominic and other staff members who had witnessed the mistreatment of the bears, sparked an immediate investigation by both the Wildlife Conservation Service and the Department of Fish and Wildlife. Ocean View Aquarium was temporarily closed pending a complete review of all exhibits and practices. Director Phillips was placed on administrative leave while facing multiple charges related to wildlife trafficking and animal cruelty. Several board members resigned, claiming they had been unaware of the director's actions. Olivia found herself at the center of a media storm, alternately praised as a wildlife hero and criticized for endangering aquarium visitors. Through it all, she remained steadfast in her conviction that she had done the right thing. When offered her job back under the new interim management, she surprised herself by declining. "I think I need something different," she told Dominic over coffee, a week after what the local press had dubbed the Ocean View incident. "Something more aligned with what I've always wanted to do." Dominic nodded, understanding in his weathered features. Maya mentioned they have openings at the Wildlife Recovery Center north of here. They work with rescued animals, rehabilitation, that sort of thing. Olivia smiled, feeling a sense of rightness at the suggestion. "I might look into that." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a young woman holding the hand of a familiar little girl. Lily's face lit up when she spotted Olivia, and she rushed forward with the unrestrained enthusiasm of childhood. "Miss Olivia." "Did the bears get away? Are they safe? Did the baby find his mommy?" Olivia laughed, kneeling to receive the little girl's exuberant hug. "Yes, to all of those questions. They're back in the wild where they belong." Lily's mother approached more sedately, her expression a mixture of pride and lingering concern. "I still can't believe my daughter was involved in all this. Her teacher nearly had a heart attack when she realized Lily had wandered off during the evacuation." "I'm sorry about that," Olivia began, but the woman waved away her apology. "No, don't be. What you did was incredible. Lily hasn't stopped talking about it, how you saved the baby bear and helped it find its mother." She smiled down at her daughter. "I think we have a future veterinarian or wildlife conservationist on our hands." Lily tugged at Olivia's sleeve. "Did my bear help? The one I gave to the baby?" Olivia's throat tightened with unexpected emotion. "Yes, sweetheart. Your bear helped a lot. In fact," she reached into her bag and pulled out a small, professionally wrapped package. "I have something for you." Lily accepted the gift with wide eyes, carefully unwrapping it to reveal a new stuffed bear, nearly identical to her beloved original but pristine, without the worn spots and missing eye that had characterized her old toy. "I know it's not the same as your special bear," Olivia said gently, "but I thought maybe this one could be a new friend." To her surprise, Lily showed no disappointment. Instead, she hugged the new bear tightly, beaming up at Olivia. "He's perfect, and you know what? I'm glad my other bear is with the baby. He needed it more than me." The simple wisdom and compassion of the child's words struck Olivia deeply. In that moment, she knew with absolute certainty that her impulsive decision in the aquarium, the choice to risk everything to save a wild creature and her baby, had been the right one. As she watched Lily chattering excitedly to her mother about naming her new bear Rescue, Olivia felt her phone vibrate with an incoming text. It was from Maya. "Turn on Channel 7 News now." Curious, Olivia excused herself and stepped outside the cafe, pulling up the local news on her phone. The headline scrolling across the bottom of the screen made her breath catch. "Bear cub and mother spotted in Rainier National Forest. Wildlife officials confirm successful integration." The camera panned to footage clearly taken with a long-range lens, showing a familiar mother bear foraging at the edge of a sunlit clearing. Nearby, her cub played with something small and indistinct, tossing it in the air and catching it, tumbling over in exuberant cub fashion. When the camera zoomed in, Olivia's heart seemed to stop for a moment. There, clutched in the cub's mouth, still recognizable despite being somewhat worse for wear, was Lily's stuffed bear, a small but enduring connection between the human child who had recognized suffering and the wild creature she had helped save. Olivia sank onto a bench, overwhelmed by the simple perfection of the moment. Tears blurred her vision as she watched the bears, now truly free, living the life they were meant to have. The mother raised her head suddenly, as if sensing the distant observation, and looked directly at the camera for a brief, electric moment, before nudging her cub deeper into the protective embrace of the forest. As they disappeared among the trees, Olivia whispered words only she could hear. "Be safe. Be wild. Be free." 3 months later, Olivia stood at the edge of a different forest, her breath forming white clouds in the crisp autumn air. Behind her, the Wildlife Recovery Center hummed with quiet activity, feeding time for the dozens of injured and orphaned animals receiving care before their eventual return to the wild. Her first months as a rehabilitation specialist had been challenging but deeply fulfilling. Each animal that passed through their care carried its own story, its own trauma, its own path to healing. Some would return to the wild, others, too habituated to humans or permanently injured, would remain as education ambassadors, teaching visitors about wildlife conservation and respect. Today marked a special milestone, her first solo release back into the wild. The young raccoon in the carrier at her feet had arrived with a broken leg and malnourishment, likely the victim of a vehicle strike that had killed its mother. Now, healed and properly weaned on a natural diet, it was ready to return to the world where it belonged. As Olivia knelt to open the carrier door, her phone chimed with an incoming message. It was from Lily's mother, a photo of Lily at her school's science fair, proudly standing beside a project titled "How I Helped Save the Bears." Beside her display board, clutched in her small hand, was the replacement stuffed bear Olivia had given her, now showing signs of the same loving wear as its predecessor. Smiling, Olivia tucked the phone away and returned her attention to the raccoon. "Ready for your big adventure?" she asked softly, unlatching the carrier door. The raccoon hesitated at the threshold, dark eyes taking in the vast, unfamiliar forest beyond. It turned once to look back at Olivia, as if memorizing her face, or perhaps offering a silent farewell. "Go on, she encouraged gently. "It's a big world out there." With a flick of its ringed tail, the raccoon finally darted forward, scampering across the forest floor and pausing briefly at the base of a towering oak. It looked back once more, then scrambled up the trunk and disappeared into the canopy, reclaimed by the wilderness that was its birthright. Olivia remained for a long moment, savoring the bittersweet joy of the release. This was the work she was meant to do, not keeping wild creatures captive for human entertainment, but helping them return to the freedom that was rightfully theirs. As she turned to head back to the center, something caught her eye, a flash of movement at the forest edge. She froze, breath catching in her throat as a familiar dark shape emerged partially from the trees, cautious but unmistakable. A bear. Not the same one from the aquarium. This one was smaller, likely younger, but a bear nonetheless, regarding her with the same wild intelligence she remembered from that fateful day. For a breathless moment they observed each other across the clearing, neither advancing nor retreating, two worlds briefly touching at their edges before separating again. Then, with a soft huff that might have been acknowledgement or merely coincidence, the bear turned and melted back into the forest shadows, leaving Olivia with the fleeting but powerful sensation that she had received a message, or perhaps a blessing, from the natural world she had sworn to protect. As she walked back to the center, her steps felt lighter somehow. The work ahead would be challenging. The battles for conservation never truly won, but moments like these, connections across the seemingly unbridgeable divide between human and wild, made every struggle worthwhile. In her pocket, her fingers brushed against something soft, a small tuft of fur from the raccoon she had just released, collected during its final health check and preserved as a reminder of its journey. Beside it was a small, worn square of fabric, a tiny piece of Lily's original stuffed bear that had been caught on the aquarium tank and that Olivia had kept as a talisman. Wild and tame, freedom and care. The boundaries between worlds that seemed so fixed were perhaps more permeable than anyone realized. In that space between, Olivia had found her purpose. And somewhere in the deep forest, a bear cub, no longer quite so small, still carried a stuffed toy that bridged the same divide, a reminder that compassion could flow in both directions across the supposed chasm between humanity and wilderness. Halfway across the country, Director Phillips sat in a sterile courtroom, his expensive suit doing little to mask his diminished presence. The charges against him had multiplied as the investigation progressed. Wildlife trafficking, animal cruelty, endangered species violations, falsification of permits, and more. As the judge delivered the sentence, 5 years imprisonment and a lifetime ban from working with animals in any capacity, Phillips stared straight ahead, his face a mask of contained rage and disbelief. How had it all unraveled so completely? One bear cub, one meddling employee, one small child who couldn't mind her own business. The gavel fell with a sound of finality, and as the bailiff approached to lead him away, Phillips caught sight of an unexpected face in the gallery, Maya from Wildlife Services, watching with quiet satisfaction. Beside her sat Dominic, his weathered features somber, but his eyes alight with justice served. And there, at the back, almost hidden in the shadows, stood Olivia Chen, the woman who had destroyed his career and his reputation. Their eyes met briefly across the crowded room. Phillips expected to see triumph or gloating in her expression, but instead found only a profound sadness. Not for him, he realized with sudden clarity, but for the animals whose suffering he had facilitated in the name of profit and spectacle. In that moment, for the first time, a flicker of something like shame passed through him. It vanished almost immediately beneath his wounded pride and anger, but its brief presence haunted him as he was led from the courtroom to begin serving his sentence. Outside on the courthouse steps, journalists clustered around Olivia and Maya, shouting questions about the case and its implications for animal welfare laws. Olivia stepped forward, her voice clear and steady as she addressed the cameras. Today's verdict sends a message that wildlife is not a commodity to be exploited for entertainment or profit, she said. These animals aren't props or attractions. They're living beings with their own intrinsic value and right to freedom. A reporter pushed forward. Miss Chen, would you do it all again, knowing the risks to your career and personal safety? Olivia didn't hesitate. In a heartbeat. Some things are worth fighting for, even when the fight seems impossible to win. Her gaze drifted beyond the cameras, toward the distant hills where forests still stood, where wild creatures still moved according to ancient rhythms untamed by human control. Sometimes, she continued softly, the most important lessons come from the most unexpected teachers. A bear taught me about courage. A child taught me about compassion. Together, they taught me that standing up for what's right isn't just an option, it's a responsibility. As the press conference concluded and the crowd began to disperse, Olivia felt a tug at her sleeve. She looked down to find Lily standing there, clutching her stuffed bear, now named Hero, and beaming up at her with unrestrained admiration. "Did we win?" the little girl asked, her innocent question cutting to the heart of the matter with childlike directness. Olivia knelt to meet her at eye level, considering how to answer. In many ways, they had won. Phillips would face justice. The aquarium had been completely reformed under new management committed to ethical practices, and most importantly, the bears were free. But the larger battle for wildlife conservation and respect for the natural world continued, with new challenges arising every day. "We won this round," she said finally, choosing honesty over simple reassurance. "But there will be other battles to fight. That's why we need brave people like you to keep caring, to keep speaking up when something isn't right." Lily nodded solemnly, then surprised Olivia by handing her the stuffed bear. "Hero wants to help you fight those battles," she declared. "He's very brave now because he learned from real bears." Touched beyond words, Olivia accepted the toy, running her fingers over its well-loved fur. "Thank you, Lily. I'll keep him with me as a reminder of what we're fighting for." As Lily skipped back to her waiting mother, Olivia held the stuffed bear gently, a tangible symbol of the unlikely chain of events that had changed the course of her life. From a terrified cub in an underwater tank to a courtroom victory for wildlife rights, the journey had been unpredictable and often frightening, but ultimately transformative. She tucked the bear carefully into her bag and stepped out into the autumn sunshine, ready for whatever battles lay ahead. Behind her, the courthouse stood as a monument to human laws and justice. Before her stretched the wider world where other laws, older, deeper, and more essential, continued to unfold in the dance of predator and prey, growth and decay, wilderness and wonder. In finding her place between these worlds, Olivia had discovered her true calling, not just to care for wild creatures, but to help build a world where wildness itself was valued and protected, where bears could be bears and not captives, where compassion crossed the boundaries between species. And somewhere in the distant forest, a bear and her cub continued their wild lives, carrying with them a strange and tattered talisman of human kindness. A stuffed bear that had traveled an impossible journey from a child's arms to the deep woods, building an unseen bridge between worlds that most believed could never connect.